Welcome to Rebloom, the podcast about reinvention, second chances, and rising into the next chapter of your life. I'm your host, Vanessa Bright, entrepreneur, environmental leader, and someone who believes it's never too late to grow into who you're meant to be. If you're rebuilding, rediscovering, or reclaiming your power, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, Rebloomers. Our guests today are Annie Hillary, Suzanne Etkin, and Allison Milligan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to start out. If I could have each one of you introduce yourself, and I would tell a little short story how I met you, but go ahead and introduce yourself first.
I'm Annie Hillary. How would I describe myself? As an environmental planner. I've been engaged as a Watershed Steward and also a master gardener over time. And I'm very excited about the need for us to become good stewards to our environmental resources. And I try to somehow give back in that area as much as I can.
So our listeners might not exactly know what a watershed steward is or a master gardener. I met Annie when she came over to my house. It was during COVID, and I had done all the work I could possibly do on the inside, and so I decided to turn my attention to the outside. And she helped me to get my flower beds and my front yard together. Up until then, I was planting annuals every season, every year, and really didn't even understand the whole, flowers come back, perennials, And so she introduced me to that, and still today I get excited every time I come out and, things are blooming again. But that was almost like a unheard of phenomenon with me. So I reached out to the Master Gardener program at the University of Maryland, so maybe if you could tell them a little bit about that program and why you would be someone that could help them the way you helped me.
The Master Gardener program works in local communities to assist in various efforts to get residents and community groups to think about using native species and to use practices in landscaping that don't require a lot of water, or the goal is to try to build some kind of resilience in your use of plants in your landscaping. And they also provide support at the farmers market in the summer months to answer questions related to issues that you may have around insects or particular pets or things like that. And that's pretty much a quick summary of what they do.
All right, thank you. Suzanne?
My name is Suzanne Etkin. I'm the executive director of the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy, and we're a nonprofit organization that trains and mobilizes community leaders like Annie and Allison and you, Vanessa, essentially to engage their community in actions that really do help reduce pollution. And I love the example that Annie gave about, or that you gave about Annie coming to your house, and I know Allison's been to your house, because that is one of the things that Watershed Stewards do. They get a whole lot of training, and then they can help people get unstuck or to do things a little bit differently so that we can all take actions on our own property to make our environment more healthy.
And yes, that's right. I'm actually in training to be a watershed steward now. It's been very exciting, but I would say I'm at that dangerous mode where I know just enough, that I think I know a lot, and I'm ready to go help somebody design their yard or do a site assessment, because that was our most recent activity. And I met Suzanne actually through Annie, because Annie knew of my work with returning citizens, and she connected me on a call with a bunch of folks that were in the environmental sector. We were not at the time. And that actually became a program that we offered to the participants that we were helping.
Nice. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having us, Vanessa. It's really good to be here. My name's Allison Milligan. I am in a new career. I've been in a new career for about 15 years now. I started learning about native plants about 15 years ago as a master gardener, as a naturalist, as a watershed steward, Chesapeake Bay landscape professional. And as I was making changes on my own property, my neighbors took notice and they started asking me if I couldn't advise them and help them. And what has happened is it's grown into hundreds of people asking for help every year. And so what I do is I visit people at their homes, at their churches, at their place of worship, at their school, at their communities, and I design landscapes on the computer. I send them the pictures, and if they like what they see and they're interested in getting plants, then I drive a truck and I pull a trailer and I go to nurseries and I get the plants for them. I deliver the plants, I site them. If it's a young family, I spend time with them and I show them how to plant, because I think most people that are in good health are capable of doing that. And I also know that if you plant something yourself, you tend to take care of it and nurture it. So that's a really important part of the experience. And then I also give a lot of talks. So I give talks and training courses to Sierra Club, to WSA, to Unity Gardens, and it's really important to get the word out. And so that's why the engagement, which is what WSA is known for, is what's going to make the difference. Because the more people we reach, everyone has their sphere of influence, and so we want to reach different people and have them influence their sphere of influence.
And all of us are working in Anne Arundel County, and it's kind of a small environmental world. Once you know one person, then you begin to know everyone. And so actually 2 people connected me with Allison, and then Allison came over and actually did the planting with a couple of the people that were in my program. They planted all natives in my backyard. And so we've talked a lot about natives. Maybe one of you could explain why natives are important and what we actually mean when we're saying natives. Anybody can go.
I'm happy to talk about native plants.
Let the queen of
Bow
to the queen.
So native plants were the plants that were here before the colonists came. They were here, before we started introducing other plants from other countries. So they're the ones that developed here and co-evolved with the insects. The flora and the fauna have all co-evolved. So those plants are more resilient. We know that they don't require fertilizer. They don't require, when they're sited properly, you're not going to need to be watering them. And they're adapted to our climate, our precipitation, our wind, our soil, and those sorts of things. And so the value of native plants can't be understated. When you look at a plant that's been brought in from another country, those plants don't have that relationship with the insects, and without the insects we don't have birds. And so it's really critical, and also protecting pollinators. And so native plants are really the foundation of the food web. And so when we talk about the food web, it's yes, it's birds, but it's also squirrels, it's also opossums, it's also fox. And I think we all have, we know these animals are important in our world. And we read about them. We name baseball teams after the Baltimore Orioles. We think we love these animals, right? We name our cars after them. We read books to our children, but we need to do more to protect them. And native plants is how we do that.
Allison, I'd just like to stress one other point. Like the native species are really part of the ecology of this region, and that's, we want to support that and nurture that. And we also, I think, the whole regenerative capacity of native plants to support the ecology is a big piece of the puzzle too, that we
absolutely.
Have to promote.
The resilience
and
the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I think once people have a sense for that, they can put it in the context of its importance for our place here. It becomes part of our identity, and then we can think of it in terms of our connection, and not just our connection, in my backyard, but I think, I see it as almost it is a spiritual connection to your landscape, and I think we have to stress that, especially now, because I think people need that environment to support their own well-being. And I think having native plants that don't require a lot, you just have to maintain them and control them, kind of, it supports, I think it gives back to us in a very emotional way.
So what would you say? I've heard some people say that native plants aren't pretty, and that's why they don't want to plant them. So how would you guys address that?
I think you have to find the native plant that you think is pretty, and they are. And I think that I had to learn this because I used to say, oh, that's just a weed. But and I hated milkweeds in particular. But once I understood what the value of that plant was and how it contributed to the ecology, how it's, I changed my mind. It was but you have to learn about it and understand it to begin and identify the plants that you like. Because there are some beautiful, I think, plants that represent, that are part of the native species. You just have to look for the plant that, you identify with.
Well, don't we also have to make a conscious decision that we want to do something that's positive for the earth, and we want it to continue to be here for our children and generations to come?
That's enormously important.
Because
what we're doing now is we're imprinting on children what they see in the environment is what they think is natural.
Right.
And crepe myrtles are not natural, right? Barberries are not natural.
No.
They're not part of our ecosystem, and they're not doing us any favors.
No.
So we all know English ivy,
Yeah.
Was introduced here. Kudzu was introduced here.
Yeah.
We know the harm and damage they're doing. And so our children see that as that's normal, just like when they go outside and they don't see the birds that we used to see growing up. We want them to see those birds. So it's kind of an injustice that we're not pursuing this more for the next generation.
Right, and I think that's part of the stewardship. It's almost redefining what stewardship means, right? It is not just going out there and planting plants, but it's planting purposeful plants. And I think with issues surrounding climate change, it's almost like you have to see, and you see the beauty of, I'm not using a lot of water. I don't have to fertilize, I have bees in my yard. I see, I'm providing habitat for migrations of species,
That's right. That's why at the Watershed Stewards Academy, we learn about plants that use that function, right?
Yeah.
So the grasses that are filtering,
Right.
the erosion control, the
Right.
stormwater management, bumps, BMPs, best management practices. Those are things that we can take to, communities and people and say, oh, you have a problem here, we know how to fix it. There's actually a native plant that can fix your problem. Because a lot of people work on different terms, right?
Right,
It's aesthetics, or it's a, different kind of a.
So let's hear from Suzanne, because I know in our Watershed Stewards class, you often say we're not doing projects just for the sake of doing a project. So let's hear from you a little bit about that statement.
Well, Watershed Stewards Academy was created to mobilize leaders, and a leader is not someone that goes out and takes all the action. A leader is someone who leads others to action. And so Vanessa's referring to this thing that I say to Watershed Stewards, which is that the point of your capstone project, which is a project you do during certification, is not to do a project, it's to bring others in so that they can act. And just hearkening back to your last question about the beauty of native plants, and it is in the eye of the beholder, and there's a larger and larger group of people who's beginning to understand that beauty. But the reality is that most people do not. Most people are used to seeing our non-native landscapes as beautiful, and so I think there are some great techniques that Watershed Stewards can employ to help people make the transition. And one of those things is to use plants that we might think of as more legible. So plants that maybe are a little bit more smaller or more compact or don't spread as much. The other thing is to think about creating gardens that have something happening all times of the year. My grandmother used to plant a garden bed every year, and it would be all annuals, and she'd plant these annuals, and so all year long you had one kind of flower, and we're used to seeing that all year long. If you planted a garden bed with only one native plant, it would bloom for a period of time and then it would subside. Whereas if you can plant a couple of different ones, you begin to look forward in the summer having your coneflowers and your black-eyed Susans, and then in the fall you see the beautiful purple asters and the goldenrods, and you begin to then have a sense of season and a sense of place. But it's, you know, Watershed Stewards can really help people dip their toe in and try just this one plant. Now that you know it, try this one more plant. And so it's really making that transition from people that are interested and don't know how to take the first step to then taking a first step. And Vanessa, you're a great example because, you know, you took the first step with Annie,
Right.
and then you wanted to take the next step and you called Allison, and on the way in here you were just talking about another step that you want to take. And I think it's that way for our communities. We will gradually change from the non-native to the native.
Well, that's why I think it's so important to talk about this stuff, because once you know, you can't unknow. And I there was a friend of mine that helped me get into beekeeping. I had no desire to keep bees, but when she explained how important they were to pollination, and that, you know, as I started researching, and you see, without the bees, we basically couldn't exist because all our food sources and everything would die with them. So I became a beekeeper.
The reason we have plant diversity is because we have bees. And most of those bees that are creating bee diversity are native bees. So they're ground bees. So they wouldn't be necessarily your honeybees,
right?
but the native bees. And so, and without plant diversity, we don't have resiliency, right? So I don't just want to see skunk cabbage, right, which is pollinated by flies. If I don't have bees, then I don't see the most beautiful plants and all the berries that the birds are going to need, you know, during the winter time for food.
Well, and Vanessa, you don't realize you might be a Eurasian honeybee keeper, but you're also the keeper of native bees with all the things that you have in your yard now. So you're that beekeeper times 2 or 3 or 5 or 10.
So we've talked a lot about natives. Let's talk about the flip side and the what we call invasives when we're out there, you know, clearing our properties. What is the damage that things that aren't, you know, native to Maryland can do to our ecosystem, and why is it important to try to get rid of those things, and even more importantly, not to introduce them in the first place in your yard?
It's March. It's calorie repair season. Anyone that knows the white plants that are blooming all along the highways, millions upon millions of them, you can't escape them. They were brought here, they thought they were sterile, and what they've done is they've uprooted our ecosystems in the most horrific way, because even maples, some of our most important native trees, are not able to get out that early, and so they get suppressed. And those plants don't offer the benefits that many of our...
I know when you drive along 50 now, you know, I can remember over, you know, my career driving to DC or commuting to DC, and just seeing how those patches have grown and how huge they are, and you go, wow. Between that, you mentioned the kudzu,
yes.
The kudzu. I mean, I don't want to start like beginning my heart leaping, but some of these things, and I'm just trying to learn more about the impact on ivy on trees, because that's another one, and it's something that I think, I don't know, people, I don't know how you learn that stuff unless you get engaged, right?
Because I didn't know that the ivy growing up the tree was bad for the tree until I met you guys. And now everywhere I go, I'm looking for it or at it and saying, oh, that's horrible. Or even bamboo. I'm like, oh my goodness, we don't need all this bamboo. Well, what all is it doing to our environment to have this stuff here? Besides, you talked about what it's doing to the maples. I know it can choke the life out of a tree when it's growing up a tree, but what else is happening?
It's just overtaking the, you know, the plants that are native to this area.
Right, and what happens when they're overtaken?
Well, there's so much. First of all, the problem of invasives is overwhelming, and there's many, many kinds of invasives. And so when we think about invasives, I think all of the native plants are here because they're providing food, shelter, space for native insects and on up the food chain. When we have invasives come in and take the place of those natives, then all of a sudden, you can think of it a little bit like if you went to a buffet, right? And you wanted to eat something. You're a little caterpillar, and you need to eat some leaves and grow up. If the buffet in your neighborhood only served cardboard and paper, that would not sustain you very well. Whereas, our native trees are providing, and our native plants are providing that food that can actually be consumed so that they can be part of the whole food web. And so I think that is one thing that is happening. The other thing, the English ivy thing, is quite clear cut, which is that when that English ivy grows up on trees, it will cause those trees eventually to die. Those canopy trees have invested 20, 30, 50, 75, 100 years to get to the size that they are, and you cannot replace those in our lifetime.
Right.
And so the invasives are overwhelming, but if we can only just keep the English ivy and the other vines from growing up trees, we will have done a tremendous service to our canopy trees.
So,
can I just say one other thing about that? Because I was talking to my niece about a week ago, and we were driving around in Bowie, and I asked her, have you ever been to an old growth forest? Because I think if you see that, you get the context of what it should be, right? And it's,
Yes.
yeah. And
Yes, you can go to a Joan Maloof talk, and she'll be quite clear about it.
Right.
Yeah, there's not very many left either.
Right, no, especially around here, right? But I think that if you have the context of what it really looks like and what it has been, changed over time, you will see, well, wait, you'll see what we really need. If we can't get it there, what can we do to mitigate some of the impacts that we've caused?
So I just want to talk about one more thing, and then we'll talk about some solutions. But what is the connection between native plants, invasives, and tree canopy, and all these things that we have discussed, and climate change?
Oh, quite a bit.
Okay.
Because so when we have warm weather in December, like we can have temperatures in the 70s, sometimes even warmer, very early in the season. So it kind of tricks our plants, and so they bloom early, and then they become out of sync with our pollinators, and that's not healthy, right? Because when the bumblebees come out, they need food. That you talked about invasives earlier. Lesser celandine is one of those that suppresses all of our ephemeral plants. And so when the bumblebee comes out, she has two things that she has to do. She has to forage, she has to find food, and she has to find a place to live and lay those eggs. And she's laying the eggs. The first batch are the drones that are going to serve her for all the broods that she's going to have throughout the season. If she just has a small brood of workers, then she's not going to get all the work done, and she's not going to have a lot of baby bumblebees, right? So those ephemerals are incredibly important. Also with climate change, I know in the work that I do, I have to be very aware now that drought is a serious problem. And some of the plants that I used to be able to plant, I'm much more cautious about, because I have to move them closer to a water source. So when people see that they're sad and they basically need a drink, that there's a water source close, right? So a lot of those plants, and they just aren't able to tolerate the heat like they used to be.
So I know in the little bit of time that I've learned that the trees help sequester carbon in the soil. So can you explain why that is an important thing for us, Suzanne?
Oh my gosh. Well, we know that one of the things that is causing our climate to change is increase in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. And so trees are really helping to suck that carbon and sequester it so that it's not in the atmosphere. And trees are sort of a magic weapon against climate change, and we certainly have lost so many trees, and so planting new trees is a really important important thing to do as we're adjusting to a new reality where we do have a rapidly changing climate. I also know that we have choices to make today that will impact what happens for our children, our children's children, and their children, and we should think carefully about those choices.
You know, and for me, an important piece on this is why it's so important for individuals to take action. There's there's no interest in this government now on policies related to climate change. So, you know, it's really, it really is. I think this is now or never in terms of person, you know, being able to be adaptive and come up with new management. But it's got to come from, I think each one of us have to take on some role that we see as important to do what we can to ensure a future for the next generations. And so the more individuals or communities are engaged, I think that's where it's going to happen. It's not going to happen from, you know, government policy.
Even before I, you know, met you guys, there was this proverb that someone said to me one time that really touched me, and it was that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children.
Right.
And at the time, or close to that time, my son had been diagnosed with asthma before he was 2 years old. And when I started researching, you know, I discovered it was because of environmental factors and what we're doing to the environment. So it was at that point when I really started to change. Like you know, we use organic products, and I got really intentional about recycling. And then years later, I found out, you know, about the bees and then about the natives. So the more I learned, the more I tried to do to make a difference. And so if we could just say one thing, that how people could get involved, what could they do? You talked about it's up to us. What would you suggest, whether it's a program or something that they can just do independently?
I don't know. I think if you could start with one pot and plant some natives and start nurturing them and loving them, and then make it bigger. You know, you don't have to wait and do a big landscape program. You can start, I always say, start with a pot and plant a pot of natives and nurture them and learn about them.
And I'm gonna say start with a friend. Because when you learn together and act together, you'll most likely continue to be taking that action. The other thing that we understand that here in Anne Arundel County, 2/3 of the people who live right here in our county do not understand that their individual actions affect pollution, and so they don't understand that they can be part of the solution. And so if you are someone who is beginning to understand the link between your own actions and pollution and solutions, real solutions, then bring a friend along with you to the next time you go to take action or the next time you go to learn. You know, here in Anne Arundel County, we are so fortunate to have so many opportunities to take action and to learn about the environment. It's very, very easy. And it can fit into anyone's schedule. So my one thing is bring a friend.
That's good, very good. So I became inspired by David Attenborough when in 1979 he wrote a book, Life on Earth. And then later on, Dr. Doug Talmay at the University of Maryland, he got me off the couch outside pulling the butterfly bush out of my yard. So you can go on the Homegrown National Park website. He has videos there if you need more inspiration. There's also a place where you can identify what native plants would be good for you. And it doesn't matter what state you live in. You can go to the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council website, CCLC, and they have the 8 essential elements of conservation landscaping. And they are relevant no matter where you live. And they talk about energy conservation, not just conservation of habitat and things. But if we don't do those things, then like our economy will suffer as well. Right? It's our environment and our economy. It's job security. It's, for us, it's the fishing industry. Crabs are so vital to Maryland.
And all this work that we're talking about is to protect the Chesapeake Bay, and that does protect those industries that you're talking about, because a polluted bay has a very negative impact on the economy of Maryland.
And it all begins with your river. So it isn't, even if you don't see the bay or even the river, the storm drain that accepts your water will impact the river, which impacts the bay. So it's just,
You have to understand your connectivity to your environment, right?
Right.
You just can't.
That's
just-
perfect.
Yeah, that's the name of this game. So if it's through a friend, a pot, or having some technical expertise, I think it's important just to become more aware. And I think because I've been in the environmental field, my career was in this field, and we've come so far with the science and our knowledge that I'm almost afraid that, we talk about the tipping point. Are we there? I think, we have to start looking at the science behind where are we? Are we really making a difference? I don't lose hope, but I keep it alive. But I do struggle with are we going to be successful? Is there going to be an environment for the next generation to inherit that, that we're still
I think we are, Annie, and it starts with
Okay.
education, and that's one of the goals of this podcast. So I want everybody to leave
No.
our audience with one positive thing, whether you could talk about your organization or tree troopers or whatever. If you could leave them with, how do I get started? So everybody might not want to go find a friend. They might want to be a part of a bigger group or organization to help them get started. So if y'all could just share that, and we will also have more information on the website as well.
Yeah. I
Go
think
ahead.
just increase your awareness and your connectivity.
So
to
education, how, where?
Just, go to an event to learn, go to the farmer's market on Saturday and talk to a master gardener. Go
That's
to a nursery this time of the year. They're doing all kinds of talks on butterfly gardens, mulching, a gamut of issues. But just become more aware and knowledgeable and understand your connectivity to the environment.
Well, and a good place to find out where all those things are happening is the Watershed Stewards Academy. So, nonprofit organization, you can go to our website, aawsa.org. And there you can sign up for our newsletter, and you will receive many, many, many opportunities to take action, to learn, and to meet other like-minded people who can journey along with you. So would really invite people to check out our website and to sign up for our newsletter.
that's great. And I would say that you can go, and if you just type in native nursery sales, there's many, Atkins Arboretum, there's many within our local community that I'm aware of, but throughout the country, master gardeners, naturalists, we're all up in arms about this, and there's gonna be native plants. And so when you go, even when you go to a nursery and they're not showing natives, then request native plants and ask them, why are you not showing native plants? Because we need to make the sellers know that this is something that's important to us, and you're losing business because you're not offering these plants. If you go to the Watershed Stewards Academy website, there's a map, and you can find a Watershed Steward in your community. So anywhere in Anne Arundel County, but there are Watershed Stewards Academy in other counties, in Howard County as well. So you can find stewards and call them, and they will come and visit. Baywise is another organization that comes and helps you to be smarter about how to protect the bay.
I'll just add, Allison, on sort of how to find native plants. A lot of people, it's very widely known now, and a lot of people really want to plant a native plant, but they don't know where to find them or which plants are right for them. And so I'll offer a couple of tips. We do on our website have a whole page on native plants, which actually gives you a plant list depending on if you have a sunny, dry location or a wet location. It gives lots of different plants. We also have a program called Wildflowers in a Weekend, and it was designed for people that don't know how to get started and want to just start with a little area, and you can order a kit that is for a sunny area or a shady area, and it will come with all the plants that you need. It will come with a planting plan. It will tell you how to maintain those plants. It will tell you a little bit about each plant, and so you can start with a little small area of your yard, and that program is offered once a year, and it will launch in April, I believe. There's a limited number of kits, so aawsa.org is a great place to get started.
Excellent.
Did you want to say one last thing?
No, and there are a lot of areas around. I live Annapolis downtown, there are a lot of opportunities to see where there are gardens that have native plants in it.
Great
So,
idea.
yeah, and they say, hey, you know, we're using native plants, and you can learn by just seeing it, and you know, and the other thing too, just to make sure that to get away from thinking of these plants as weeds, you know, they're beautiful even when they're not at their, you know, peak. You know, like to leave them up for the winter, you know, their you know, their frame of the plants are beautiful. So I think you just have to, I had to learn this, but you just have to rethink about what is beauty in nature when you're looking at the native plants and their contribution to the ecosystem.
So ladies, I just want to thank you. It was so amazing to have you here today. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in, and I encourage you to take one small step to start making a difference for the environment.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you for spending this time with me on Rebloom. If this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone else who might be ready for their next chapter. And remember, reinvention doesn't mean starting over, it means starting wiser. Until next time, keep growing, keep rising, and keep blooming.